So almost every tool in this list I didn't have a chance to buy as a new woodworker simply because they didn't exist yet, which is a shame because if they had existed, I would have spent my money much differently. But in this video, my pain can be your gain by helping you avoid those same regrets. Let's go. One of the most important tasks in my workshop is accurately setting bit and blade heights and the distance from the fence. And I recently found out that JessEm started making a tool setting gauge that may be the best I've ever seen. It's made of stainless steel, so it's much more stout and durable than the aluminum setup blocks and other tool setting gauges that I've used throughout the years. If you didn't know, your woodworking tools can cut aluminum. Things like angle iron and T-track for your projects can easily be cut by your saws. The problem is so can your aluminum setup blocks. This one has really been chewed up on the bottom from going back and forth across the blade so many times. And over time, that's just going to make this inaccurate because it's going to remove enough material that this starts to read a different setting than what it indicates on the gauge. This one has detents in it all the way from 1/16 of an inch up to 2 1/4 inches, so it's really easy to set accurate heights quickly. And if you see this up close, it has these little teeth on both sides that pull the gauge exactly into place, so it's really quick and easy to accurately set the height every time. JessEm does make this gauge in 2 different sizes. The larger one goes up to 3 3/8 inches, which I think is great for setting your table saw blades to their maximum height. But they do also have the smaller one that I said earlier goes to 2 1/4 inches. Still great for table saws, but also things like setting the bit heights at a router table. And of course, this one is going to be a little bit cheaper, so you have some options that fit your budget. And these gauges also come in metric. I opted to get the smaller one in metric because I am branching out and using a metric a little bit more in my work, so this one is going to come in very handy. Another really awesome thing about these gauges is that they have 2 reference lines on them. And what those allow you to do is measure referencing off the bottom or the top of this plate. My absolute favorite way to use this feature is that when I'm cutting grooves for my drawer bottoms, I always set the depth of the cut to 3/8 of an inch and the distance away from the fence at 1/2 of an inch. And because of the dual lines, I can set the gauge one time and then use the bottom of the gauge to set the blade height and the top of the gauge to set the distance from the fence. I also love that these gauges have offset studs on them, so you can use them vertically like this to set bit and blade heights, but you can also set them horizontally if you need to set distances from fences accurately. I do still think having a good set of aluminum setup blocks is a value add to any shop, but these gauges have definitely taken over the majority of the duty at my table saw and my router table. So 2 years ago, I reviewed the Pika mechanical pencil and said this: I think its max potential is really going to be for marking up rough lumber for basic dimensioning. I wouldn't be doing any fine detail work with this type of pencil. Well, fast forward to 2024 in the International Woodworking Fair in Atlanta, I ran into the guys from Pika and found this. Now, at first, it looks just like a regular Pika pencil. It's got the same rugged case, but upon further inspection, it's a traditional mechanical pencil. This is the Pika Fine, which uses 0.9mm lead instead of the whopping 2.8mm leads that you have to sharpen yourself on the standard Pikas. It still gives you that deep hole marking capability, but also allows for much finer marking of layout lines on your work. This version drops the sharpening feature in the tip of the holster because, well, it's just not needed anymore, and it does add the traditional mechanical pencil eraser. I was so happy to find this because I really feel like the company is trying to meet me in the middle with this product. So if you remember, I love using Pentel Graph Gear pencils in either 0.5 or 0.7mm lead for marking layout lines on my work. But the 0.9mm lead of the Pika, that's not much of a compromise in order to get a mechanical pencil in the form factor of a Pika that can get into places that my Pentels just can't get. And just eliminating the need to sharpen the darn thing like a number 2 pencil is a huge improvement in efficiency. This lead is stout enough that marking up rough lumber won't easily break the lead, and it's fine enough that you can make pretty decent layout lines. So in that way, it's kind of a jack of all trades. So I'll admit that I was not on the Pika hype train before because I thought it was only good for rough work in my shop. But with the addition of the Pika Fine, I'll happily eat my crow because going forward, I am 100% on Team Pika. Well done, team. The next item is one that I discovered in 2023, and ever since then, I've been slowly figuring out how to incorporate it into more and more things that I do in my shop. I have an MFT workstation in my shop, as well as dog holes in my assembly outfeed table and in my mobile workbench. And I love it because there are so many accessories that work with this system that you can buy, like bench dogs and fences for work holding, and for clamping, this is the primary clamp that you would use. It slips down into the dog hole and then clamps your work, and this is a great option if you need a quick way to secure your work. But when I go to use a jig or a tool, I don't always want that clamp sticking up in the way, and that's where power lock dogs are so amazing. It's a special kind of bench dog that can fasten things to your work table using the dog holes. Once inserted, this locking screw on top can then be tightened, which activates this locking lug on the bottom, securing whatever you want firmly to your work table. And the best part is this clamp sits completely flush with the surface so that there's nothing in the way of your work, and you don't have to reach underneath the table to secure it with something like a star knob like you have to do sometimes with other bench dog connectors. Here's an example where I use the power lock dogs to secure my mini router table to my MFT. This is completely secure, and I can fully adjust the fence on the table to any position that I want because there's no interference from clamps. I also added them to the base of the mini router table so that if I wanted to use the full table, I can still secure it and not worry about it slipping around on me while I'm working. I even created a new platform for my pocket hole jig, which I'm absolutely loving, and I added dog holes to it just so I could use the power lock dogs. Pretty much any jig that you can add dog holes to can be used in this way, but you do have to add a little chamfer to the top of the dog hole for these to sit perfectly flush. You can use a little router with a chamfer bit to create this, but also TSO makes a little chamfer reamer tool that chucks into your drill and takes care of this for you. So like I said, I'm always trying to come up with new ways that I can use these power lock dogs because I think they're so handy. But if you have any ideas for how you would use these in your shop, leave those ideas down in the comments below because, hey, I'd like to hear them and try and utilize them in my own. So whenever I do one of these videos, I always like to include an item where I just go ahead and declare every wood shop should have one of these. Absolutely no excuses. And my criteria is always simple, just two things. It's got to be dirt cheap and it has to work well. It has to do what it says it's supposed to do. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the abrasive cleaning stick, or what I like to call the magic eraser. Here, check this out. If your sandpaper is loaded with dust and starts to be less effective, you may think, well, it's just time to throw away the disc and start over. But all you have to do is run this cleaning stick on the disc, and so much of that dust is going to just disappear. It's not going to make the paper exactly like new again, but it's definitely going to extend the life of it, and it's going to work on any sander in your shop. I use mine all the time on my drum sander, like pretty much every time that I use it, and it also works on your random orbit sander. See, check this out. Isn't that just the most satisfying thing ever? Now you know why I call it a magic eraser. By the way, this will not melt or gum up your sandpaper. It creates kind of a rubbery dust as you use it, but it won't get all caught in the grid of the disc because what's the point of removing all the wood dust if you're just going to replace it with rubber gunk? Anyway, like I said, this is a must-have for any shop that does any type of sanding at all. This disc is going to run you about $10, and that's going to buy you a lot of extra life on your sandpaper. The next item on my list is actually changing the way that I think about solving problems in my workflow. This is the Bamboo Labs A1 Combo, and it's a 3D printer made specifically to be beginner friendly and at an entry-level price. If you're not familiar with 3D printing, Bamboo Labs is an industry leader in making 3D printers that deliver high-quality results, incredible print speeds, and beginner-friendly usability. When paired with their website MakerWorld, you can search for 3D models uploaded by other users for free, download, slice, and print that model with 3 button pushes and 0 technical knowledge. But instead of talking about what it can do, I want to focus on showing you how I use 3D printing to solve problems in my shop. The plus side of this is you don't have to have any technical design experience at all. Just find something that looks like it will fit your needs and print it yourself. For instance, one very common problem I have when I use my domino is when I go to dry fit my project, the dominoes often get stuck in the workpiece and can be very difficult to remove. I was able to find a set of dry fit dominoes on MakerWorld, which are very slightly undersized and don't stick in the mortises, which make dry fitting a lot less stressful. You can get any of the domino sizes, and the best part is I was able to print out a batch of 10 of these in about an hour and a half and at a cost of just $1.17. That's awesome. Another very common problem that woodworkers face almost daily is getting all your various dust collection hoses to fit together. How come there are so many dust collection options and none of them seem to fit? It's just a mystery of the universe, I guess. But I guarantee you someone has already solved that problem and created a dust hose adapter that goes from anything to anything else. Whenever I'm gluing up a project, I always hate that the glue settles in the bottom of the bottle, and every time I pick it back up, I have to wait for the glue to get to the tip again, and the problem only gets worse the emptier the bottle gets. Oh, are you ready now? Thank you. Well, not anymore, because now I can store my bottles upside down in between uses, so the glue is always ready to go. Need a place to hang your sander between uses? What about tool battery storage? I was able to find options for all 3 of my battery brands. And this doesn't even scratch the surface of all the custom storage and organization options out there geared specifically to your shop. I'm so excited to have 3D printing as a part of my workflow now. Just in the couple of weeks that I've had this machine, I've figured out solutions to so many little headaches in my shop. And I'm so appreciative of places like MakerWorld, where people have already shared the solutions that they figured out, and I don't have to learn how to design myself, which just got me up and running so much faster with this machine. But I have been teaching myself basic CAD design in my spare time because I don't want to always have to rely on someone else having figured out the solution first. I want to be able to design my own custom solutions to problems that I run into, and I'm going to be sharing more on how to really leverage 3D printing to get the most out of it in the near future. So one of the most important tools for any workshop to have is an accurate and reliable square for doing markup and layout. And there are a lot of different options out there to choose from, but this one is one that's a prime example of me saying, man, I really wish this was available earlier on in my woodworking career. This is yet another tool from our maple syrup loving friends in the north, JessEm. By the way, did you know the name JessEm is a combination of Jessica and Emily, the daughters of the founder of the company? And as a father of 3 girls, that speaks to me very personally. I mean, nothing says family-owned business like naming it after your kids. And this square has 2 things I've never seen before on a square. There are tabs on the blade, and these are called flex grips. The lines are etched by a laser to grip onto your work surface so that when you put pressure on them, the square is not going to move around while you're marking your layout lines. By the way, all of the lines and markings on this square are laser etched to within 0.004 of an inch of accuracy. So that's super accurate for woodworking, and these are not going to fade away or wear off like they would if they were printed on. And also, I really like this. The square has a retractable balancing tab that allows it to stay put on the edge of your workpiece, which I think is a nice feature because now I can take this hand off the square and press on those flex tabs and not worry about the square moving or falling on me. And if you don't need that little tab, you can just use this little switch to click it in, and oh man, that sounds so satisfying. Now with the tab retracted, I can use the square this way to check my workpiece and the tab doesn't get in the way. These squares also come with notches every 1/16 of an inch so that you can drop your pencil right in there and get your accurate layout lines. And some of you may be asking, well, how does this compare to the Woodpecker square? After all, I am a huge fan of the red tools, and I've had the stainless steel version of the Woodpecker square for several years now. So here are my thoughts on these 2. From a build quality and accuracy standpoint, I see no difference between these 2 squares. They're both very stout and extremely accurate for woodworking, which is to be expected from premium tools. Both have the little notches for your pencil every 1/16 of an inch for doing layout lines, and both are etched by laser. The only noticeable difference physically between these 2 squares is that the Woodpecker, instead of having the retractable tab, it has a full width blade which has markings on the front and down the side, which I think is a really nice feature. And of course, the JessEm square has the flex grip tabs. But here's where things get really interesting, because this 12-inch square is $40 cheaper, which is a 25% savings over the Woodpecker. Now, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to preference, which one of these 2 you like better. But if it were me starting all over again with my money, I would absolutely go with the JessEm square, simply because there's not $40 worth of difference between these 2 squares. JessEm also makes an 8-inch and 6-inch version of this square, so you do have options that can help fit your budget. From the first day that I published the video on building this outfeed and assembly table, I got questions about how I keep sawdust and debris from going through the dog holes and into the drawers. And for the longest time, my answer was, I don't do anything. A little sawdust in the drawers doesn't hurt anybody. But since then, I actually found a really great and cheap solution to that problem. It turns out UJK makes these little plastic dog hole caps that fit into the holes like this. They sit slightly below the surface, maybe a 32nd of an inch on chamfered holes. That way if you're working at your bench, you're not going to catch or snag on these and pull them out. And the caps have a slight catch on the edge to make it easier to pull out with a screwdriver, and you can always pop them out from underneath if you can reach them. These holes do need to be chamfered for these to work properly, and as I showed in a previous video, TSO makes this awesome little chamfer reamer tool that fits into your drill like this and not only adds a little chamfer, but also cleans any debris like dry glue out of the hole. And I really like that they're made of plastic so that if you nick them with a saw or with one of your chisels, none of your tools are going to get damaged. But the very best part is that a box of 40 of these caps costs just $12. And if you're wondering, a single MFT has 77 holes in it, so 2 boxes, $25, and you can take care of your whole work surface. That's awesome. Last year when I built my portable workbench, I was searching for a fence system that was both lightweight and low profile so I can make accurate crosscuts while I was working outside the shop. And the one that I found that checked both these boxes was this one from UJK. It's made of lightweight aluminum, so it's not hard to carry around with the bench, and it's low profile at only 10 millimeters high. And because it's so low profile, I can most of the time just leave it attached right here on top of the bench when I transport it because there's a low likelihood of it getting snagged on something. The system comes with its own bench dogs that sit flush with the fence, which is nice, and they can be clamped into place, but you do need to use these clamping knobs to secure it from underneath your work table. And this is another great place that you can use the power lock dogs. That way you can fasten them from the top and you don't have to worry about keeping track of these little locking knobs. I mean, come on, I'm gonna lose one of these eventually. You can use this fence in combination with whatever track system and track square you have to ensure that accurate square cuts are made, and it has this movable stop block for making repeatable cuts. You can also use longer bench dogs, and this allows you to set your workpiece under the fence and use it like a straight edge guide for doing work like making datas with a router, which I think is a great extra feature for this fence. Even if you don't use it in a mobile workbench like I'm doing, it works just as well inside your shop if you have an MFT or any workbench that has 20 millimeter dog holes. The last items on my list, I will grant you, are not woodworking tools, but they can help you utilize your tools to the fullest extent in times of need. See, the last few months have brought a lot of severe weather events, especially in my part of the country, and so it got me thinking, am I doing everything I can do to be prepared for losing power for 1 or more days? I do own a couple of small power banks, which are super handy, but I also have a pile of cordless tool batteries just sitting here. So I started searching for solutions and luckily found something different for each of my 3 battery platforms. These little device chargers slip over the top of your cordless tool batteries, and they allow you to charge a number of different devices. This one from DeWalt has 2 USB chargers on it, and even though I saw some third-party chargers that looked more capable than this one, I really wanted to stick to branded items only. That way I would be more or less guaranteed that they would play well with my batteries because, I mean, in an event, that's the last time you want to find out that there's issues with the technology. And this one from Festool has USB A and C on it, but it also has a wireless charger on top, so you can just drop your phone or other devices right up here and then free up these other 2 charges for other devices. And this one from Milwaukee actually seems like the most capable because not only do you get DC power through the USB A and C slots, but it's also a power inverter, so you get 120 volt AC power as well for charging laptops, lamps, radios, whatever small devices that you may have that require AC power. Granted, you'll probably want a bigger battery to take full advantage of this, but it is at least capable of doing it. Like I said, not great for woodworking, but it's nice to know that I have the ability to utilize all of the power sources that I have when I need them. I'm going to be setting these aside for emergency use, but you can also use these for camping or job site work. Well, that's everything that I have for this video. Have fun in the shop and be safe.